I am Hannah Brixey, Global Director for Gender at the World Bank. And today we will have a fascinating discussion of the new evidence and experience about female entrepreneurs who cross over to male-dominated sectors. The new analysis that will be presented and discussed was produced by the network of the World Bank Group's regional gender innovation labs with the support of the Umbrella Fund for Gender Equality. So why is this new analysis important? Well, we know that sectoral choice matters for firm performance, but exactly why and how occupational segregation matters for women entrepreneurs, and why and how does it matter for their profitability and growth? These are questions that have not been addressed adequately so far. The new publication brings a rich global synthesis of research on occupational segregation of female entrepreneurs. It looks at the most salient factors associated with being a female entrepreneur who crosses over to a male-dominated sector. And the report takes us to 10 countries in 3 regions, and it shares insights from a global survey of entrepreneurs. So with us here today, a distinguished group of speakers will discuss what policies and programs can support women entrepreneurs to cross over to and ultimately succeed in typically more profitable male-dominated sectors. Speakers, whom I will introduce in a moment, will also address your questions from the audience that we are collecting via the chat function. So we will start now with opening remarks by Makhtar Diop, Managing Director and Executive President of the International Finance Corporation at the World Bank Group. Makhtar, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and good morning, Anna. Good morning, Mamta. Good morning, Marcus, all colleagues of the World Bank that have been working on this topic. It's a huge pleasure to be here today with you because, as many of you know, this is an area which is very dear to my heart. But let me just say a few words of introduction to kick off the conversation that I know will be very rich with all the very great panels that we have put together. So let's start by just an image, which is to picture owner of a construction firm and a company, an IT company, an automotive repair shop, and to picture which gender will be leading that company. If you see a man, it's not surprising because these are sectors which are highly dominated by male. They are dominated by male, and they are the owners. And these companies tend to be very profitable, much more profitable than sectors like trade or retail, where female-owned firms tend to concentrate. So this is an example of the global profitarchy, and I love this concept, which is a concentration of women in less profitable sectors and in less profitable economic activities within sectors when they are compared to men. And this profitarchy is doing more than just holding women back financially. It's limiting global economic potential on a massive scale. We know, looking at the literature and economic research, that over the last 50 years, the increased participation of women and other marginalized groups in high-skilled professions has contributed significantly to GDP growth. Some estimate that in the US, he has contributed to 40% of GDP growth per capita. Economists also researchers further estimate that eliminating this occupational gap in gender could also have a significant impact on GDP. Some are estimated it at 10%, which is an order of magnitude of this impact. This number can be ignored, they are significant. And every day that an entrepreneur faces limited job choices based on their gender is a day that we all lose because the GDP growth is lower and we have much less contribution to wealth in countries and to reducing inequity. Fortunately, there are actionable steps that we can take to help close this gap and ensure more equitable access to opportunity. And that's where we are here today to discuss. This report is for me an essential report and a great contribution in the work that the bank is doing, but also a great contribution in the discussion on gender in emerging economy specifically. The new World Bank report, Breaking Barriers, Female Entrepreneur Who Cross Over to Male-Dominated Sector, examine what went right for women who did make the leap into professions typically dominated by men. The research, which covered 10 countries and 3 regions, paints a clear picture. Women who operate business in male-dominated sector outperform women operating in female-dominated sectors. For example, in Uganda, and that was the first time really I come across that evidence, women in male-dominated sector earn as much as men in the sector, and 100% more than women in female-concentrated sector. In Laos, women in male-dominated sector earn about 80% more than women in female-concentrated sectors. So all these numbers, are important, but the main lesson to take from that is that helping women break into this traditional male-dominated field could help close persistent economic gender gap. At IFC, which is a private sector branch of the World Bank Group, we work with clients in getting more women in the construction industry. This is the case in Papua New Guinea and in India. We are addressing also this gap in even more urgent manner in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, which dealt a major blow to the gender equity progress made around the world in recent years. The pandemic forced countless women out of the work market and into unpaid care work. And supporting women-owned businesses and female entrepreneurs will be essential to ensuring an equitable, sustainable, and resilient recovery. So building back better should be centered around those questions which are reducing inequity, but also allowing us to reduce that gap between income gap between women and men. Implementing programs and policies that empower women to enter more profitable sector, maximize their opportunities, should be an important part of this effort. And the Breaking Barrier report gives us a very important, good insight. I just wanted to end up by saying that I was in last week in East Africa. I visited Kenya and I visited Tanzania. And the demand for this is very important. I met with the head of state of Tanzania, the president, who is a woman, and she asked IFC to make the gender agenda the main entry point of our intervention in Tanzania. So we will be working very much with companies. We are working with banks to be able to have a particular targeted credit for women, particularly SMEs. And the finding around this question for us would be very important, because we will try to translate it in a dialogue with companies that we are supporting, and ensuring that we take into account this Breaking Barrier agenda in the support that we are bringing to women-led companies. So you will see more of us, more of IFC talking about this agenda, because as we are entering more and more centrally in our work in emerging economies in a post-COVID-19 era, we have an opportunity here to do great things. So we have today a very distinguished group of panelists, and then we're going to dive in this specific policy recommendation in just a minute. I just want to end up by saying that I would like a big thanks to Marcus Goldstein. He was a colleague I worked with very closely when I was VP for Africa for the World Bank. And we had the privilege of launching the first Gender Innovation Lab. It was a very, very important part of our work. I would like also to thank my VP, Mamta Murthy, who was also part of the Africa team that was supporting the work that was done, and that really, which was replicated in the rest of the institution. And I'm very glad that now it's becoming very much a centerpiece of the work that the gender group is doing across the World Bank group. So now, I mean, I'm sure that you are eager to listen to the specialists, those who have been working on this. And I hope that this report will bring us some more insight that will help us in really in our work at IFC with companies, with SMEs, to be able to break this barrier. So I handed it to you, Ahana, and I wish to all of you a very, very successful discussion and session. Thank you.
Maktar, thank you so much for your opening remarks and for your vivid illustration of the challenge of occupational segregation, and also the illustration how IFC is involved in addressing the challenge and in improving and supporting gender equality in the private sector. Let me now invite my colleague Marcus Goldstein, who is the head of the World Bank's Africa Gender Innovation Lab and the lead author of the new report. Marcus, please, we are all eager to hear your insights from the report, and the key findings and recommendations of the report. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Hannah. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. So what I'm going to do is take you through a quick tour of the report, and then later we're going to have lots of discussion in a super awesome panel. So this report is a big team effort, and we'll have credits at the end. So let's go to Uganda. And Maktar had us do this thought exercise. When we think of a female entrepreneur, I'll own this, I'm more likely to think of these women who are hairdressers. That's a female concentrated sector. I'm less likely to think about Betty. Betty's a metal worker, and that is a male dominated sector in Kampala and in many countries in the world. So this report asks the question, what can we learn from women like Betty, not to make women more like men, but to level the playing field so that opportunities are closer to equal. What's new about this report? Super exciting data. We have survey data from 10 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and this is complemented with global data from the Future of Business survey, which is implemented through a social media platform that covers 97 countries. Generally, the survey data is looking at micro entrepreneurs. This Future of Business survey also gives us some insight into larger businesses as well. So when we're talking about these sectors, what are we talking about? So male-dominated sectors are things like automobile, maintenance, and sales. Here you can see in all three regions that we're looking at the data for, it's male-dominated. Female-dominated sectors, let's go back to Kampala, we have our hairdressers, all three regions. So we define it for the purposes of the analysis here as 70 to 75% of firms are owned by men. That makes a male-dominated sector. Now, I think it's important to keep in mind that throughout the world, there is diversity in what these sectors are as well. So wood manufacturing and repair, for example, in Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa is male-dominated, but it's female concentrated in East Asia. Trade of textile and footwear, diverse across regions, but also within regions. In East Asia, some countries that's male-dominated and some it's female concentrated. Now, this sectoral contribution, I think one important thing to keep in mind is when we look at this graph is that women are concentrated, women are found in a smaller number of sectors. So their sectors, these female concentrated sectors, they're crowded. And that means that profits are going to be lower, competition is going to be more intense. They also are characterized by more informality, and sometimes they're characterized by lower potential for growth. Men, on the other hand, are in a larger number of sectors, and so maybe competition is less. There's more opportunity for profits. What underpins this are sort of, you can think of two main kinds of factors. First is social roles. So let me give you an example. My children attended the local public elementary school, and there were, out of 50 teachers, there were 2 men. So what happens to my children when they leave elementary school? They think of elementary school teachers as women. And this kind of, it wasn't something someone said to them, or it's this role modeling, these social roles that evolve over time. When I went to school, it was the same thing. And so they persist over time. These ideas, these norms of what's appropriate for a quote, appropriate for women, those persist. The other set of things to think about are sort of constraints in the market. Women are less likely to have collateral. They're less likely to own property in almost every country in the world. And so they're going to have more trouble getting finance. So there are these constraints in the market as well as these social roles that underpin this persistence over time. This matters, as Mokhtar told us, and in many countries, this is a major contributor to the earnings gaps between male and female entrepreneurs. Let's look at the numbers. So if we look at this profitarchy, as Mokhtar indicated, in Uganda, Betty, our metal worker, women like her on average are making 140% more than double the hairdressers that we saw, right? So hugely big profit differential. Now, one thing to keep in mind is what we're talking about today is horizontal segregation. Think of glass walls, not the glass ceiling. But we also in this world have vertical segregation. The glass ceiling we've heard a lot about. Mexico gives us a good example. So the most profitable firms in our data from Mexico are males in male-dominated sectors. The second most profitable are males in female-concentrated sectors. So what you're seeing here is that the number 3 is females in male-dominated sectors. So even when women break in the case of Mexico, when they break into male-dominated sectors, they're not making the same. So today we're talking about this transition across sectors, but you have to keep in mind that even once that's achieved, we're going to have issues, and that's for another time, of advancement within the sector. We often find, for example, that women are concentrated in the lower value part of different sectors. Okay, but coming back to this crossing over and this occupational segregation, I want to reiterate a point that Mokhtar made, is that this basically is preventing people from getting to the jobs that are best for them. So they earn less, okay? But it also matters for the economy as a whole, because our talent is not being most effectively used. All right, so the big takeaway so far is that women in male-dominated sectors are going to make more money than if they stay in the female-concentrated sectors. What factors are associated with these women who manage to break the glass wall and cross over? So there's a lot of diversity at the country level. Here's a word cloud of all the factors that showed up. But across these countries, across our 10 countries in the global data, some common factors are emerging. First of all, spousal support. Having the spouse help with the introduction to the sector, with providing finance, with providing moral and technical support as she enters this new business. That seems to be important. The second, which we see everywhere, is social networks and mentors, relatives, role models in these male-dominated sectors, who are often men, because these are male-dominated sectors. Those are important for helping introduce and perhaps sustain the entrepreneurs as they make this leap. Early exposure and training in male-dominated sectors, also important. Getting that sense that this is possible early in life. Education matters a lot. Social emotional skills such as self-efficacy also seem to matter. Self-efficacy is broadly associated with entrepreneurial success around the world. Here we have women who are defying social norms. So this sense of empowerment is going to matter a lot to help make that leap and sustain. And then as I mentioned earlier, these are capital intensive industries. So access to capital and loans are going to be important. So those are the factors. Can we think about policies that help support women who want to make this transition? The first policy we can think about is information. So in Ethiopia, we looked at what women knew about these male-dominated sectors, and what we found was that 64% of the women who were in female-concentrated sectors, but earned less than the average earnings in male-dominated sectors. 64% of those women thought that they made the same or more. So they didn't even know that these sectors were more profitable. The second policy handle we can think about, and here we're still learning a lot about how to do this effectively, is how can we improve spousal support? In the Democratic Republic of Congo, women and men in the same household are both operating businesses, okay? And the woman will have 50% lower profits, even when she's in the same sector as the husband. Is there a way to help these households work more effectively together for the benefit of all? Third thing to think about is removing financial constraints and providing access to that larger growth capital for these female firms, dealing with the collateral problem. The fourth is education and technical training in male-dominated sectors, and we're going to see an example of that in just a minute. The next thing to think about is getting support early, thinking about starting this process with our daughters, with the adolescents. And another option is also, as we provide that support, thinking about how we can engage role models and mentors to help continue that support and sustain the transition. Finally, once women move into these sectors, they're going against social norms. And so we have to think about how can we support them in dealing and hopefully reducing harassment and the discrimination that they're going to face. So let me jump to an example of putting this policy into action, which comes from the Republic of Congo. So here, applicants to a vocational training program were randomly assigned to watch a sort of generic video, or they were given a video on the trade-specific earnings, which would reveal how much more profitable the male-dominated sectors are. And in fact, for men, this video, it doesn't matter which video they watch, but for women, there was a 28.6% increase in the number of women who enrolled in a male-dominated trade once they saw this video with that information. But as we saw earlier, other factors also matter. Indeed, this treatment effect is almost 4 times larger among women who had technical experience or prior knowledge of the sector. Again, that early exposure matters. It was 3 times larger among women with a male role model, that role model to help sustain and help access. So bottom line here, this is not a expensive or complicated intervention, but it's something that can be scaled. And so Mamta may talk about this later. This is something that the World Bank is trying to scale and reach more young women across sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere. I'm going to stop here. I just want to acknowledge the co-leader of the report, Naira Kalra, who's also connected, and the large team. These were individual country studies that were built up into this larger picture. So thank you all, and let me turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Marcus, and congratulations to you and Naira and the entire team on this excellent report. You illustrated the kind of evidence that the report brings on what helps women to overcome the glass walls and the glass ceilings across sector, and how spousal support, social networks, skills and capital matter, and what policies work in these areas. So it is my pleasure now to introduce our esteemed panelists to share their views and experience on occupational segregation and on what holds women entrepreneurs back from entering male-dominated sectors, and what the solutions are to help them break into and succeed in these more profitable sectors. Ms. Regina Onu is the CEO of Soronko Academy, a technology, coding, and digital skills development center in Africa, pioneering the way for young people, especially women and girls, to realize their economic potential, equipping them with the technical and soft skills for dignified, fulfilling jobs. The Academy is the first coding and human-centered design academy in West Africa, and has trained over 20,000 women and girls, and has expanded to train boys, men, and children with disabilities. Welcome, Regina. Ms. Leticia Yaracuita-Senueva is a serial entrepreneur, passionate about financial institutions, and especially financial inclusion and technology. She has founded Screa, a non-profit that has supported and trained over 200,000 women entrepreneurs from marginalized communities in Mexico and Central America. And Leticia is also an angel investor and general partner of LEAP Global Partners, a cross-border fund, and is also actively involved in the Mexican startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem. Welcome, Leticia. And Dr. Amalia Adininger Vidasanti is the Deputy Minister for Economic Affairs at the Ministry of National Development and Planning, Bapenas, of the Republic of Indonesia, who will share with us the policy perspective. Welcome, Dr. Vidasanti. Let me now turn to Regina. Regina, you are a computer scientist. You are now teaching girls how to code, and you're empowering them to pursue opportunities in STEM fields. So what has your experience been in a male-dominated industry? What challenges have you faced? And what kind of strategies did you use to overcome them? We'd love to hear your story.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for having me in this session and all the great work that was done in the report, which resonates a lot with my own personal experience. So I'm just going to start off with, even at the beginning point of when I wanted to go into technology, I faced a lot of people telling me it's just for boys, and there's this stereotype that girls are wired for arts and humanities and boys are wired for science and math. So it's almost as if there was the perception that in our DNA, we're not going to be good, you know, in the science and math field. So that was that initial hurdle, getting over that. And then when I finally went on to study in my educational system, you know, the challenge was, it was a lot of rote memorization. And I think for the more technical skills, you need a lot of practice. Fast forward into my career, when I started off as a software developer, I was always in the minority. I worked in 2 international banks before, and I was the only female in the IT department. So I faced a lot of sexism, stereotyping, discrimination, you name it. When I went off to set up my own business, all those things followed, because also coming into this male-dominated space, you know, there is what I get up till today, which is the 5-second shock reaction. Each time I present myself, you know, as the CEO of a tech business, there's always, you're not what I expected. I'm always like, okay, I don't know what you're expecting. Or you have some people that will say, oh, okay, are you sure you can build software? Maybe you're playing with Microsoft Office and Microsoft Word and you think it's software development. But one of the things that I think really stands out with the report is the economic piece, because I became economically independent really fast because it was a high-paying sector. And so I stopped depending on my parents early on in my career. And in my business, I saw that, it made economic sense going into this male-dominated spaces. So for me, I have had to learn, to develop a tough skin, because you do get a lot of comments and negative reactions. There's also the cultural aspect, because if you're in a room of mostly men and you assert yourself, you increase, the number of baritones in your voice, it's seen as disrespectful. So I've had some experiences where I'm passionately trying to argue out a point, and then the feedback is, why did I raise my voice past a certain point as I spoke to older men, right? And I've had to let them know that, I'm just passionate and I'm trying to get my point across. I also had to learn how to negotiate effectively, which is something that we're not socialized here a lot to do, because we're socialized to be agreeable and smile. So when you come to spaces, where there are a lot of men, you really have to be confident and you have to learn the art of negotiation, because the number of zeros always go down. I know as soon as I walk in, they decrease the zero. And so I have to make sure that I assert myself more such that my zero comes back up to where it's supposed to be. So these are all the different exchange. And I think also there's the comparison by society on if I'm fit enough for whatever role I'm in. So what that means is that I'm a mother and a wife. There'll be some people that will say to my husband, how are you able to marry a woman like this? Because I'm so confident and I have to be in my space. Or they'll say, how am I able to raise my daughter? Because, I am chasing after my dreams and doing all sorts of things. So those are all the different challenges. And for me, I walk through them by building allies, identifying the gatekeepers of patriarchy and seeing how we can work together, and making sure that, we are empowering more women and girls in the space, such that when people meet females in tech, it's not special, it's just normal.
Thank you so much, Regina, for sharing your story and for sharing how you work and how you are a role model for empowering girls and women into STEM fields and more broadly in lives. So thank you for the story. We will come back to you with some questions, and we are also collecting questions through the chat function. Now I'll turn to Leticia. Leticia, evidence, as you know, shows that technical training, access to information, and education can enhance female entrepreneurs' skills and knowledge and help facilitate their transition to male-dominated sectors. So in your experience at CREA, what types of training do you find most effective to support women entrepreneurs? And how can we ensure that training programs meet the diverse needs of women coming from different socioeconomic and educational backgrounds?
Thank you, Hannah. I'm very grateful and I'm proud to share this panel with you, with Regina and Amalia. And this report is really illuminating. It provides a necessary roadmap to ensure that women can prosper and thrive alongside their male counterparts in any sector they choose. And I really congratulate the team that worked so hard to bring it to life. I've always been struck by how we're led to believe that some large companies are too big to fail and that most micro and small enterprises are too small to succeed, especially if they're led by women. And throughout the years, CREA has been evaluating the impacts of its trainings and services on the performance of these female entrepreneurs. And we've seen that they actually do benefit and can leverage these trainings to support themselves to grow, to access the necessary resources they need to scale their businesses. And most recently, we've seen preliminary results that show that after getting virtual training around resilience, managerial, and digital marketing skills, women that are trained are almost twice as likely to legally register their brand with the authorities, for example. And we see that they do a lot more things to build businesses that can be a lot more sustainable over time and eventually become more attractive for different types of financial services. Over the last decades, we've seen some differences between necessity and opportunity entrepreneurs. So between those that are forced to become entrepreneurs as a way to self-employ versus those that are voluntarily choosing to start a business because they are able to identify a good opportunity in the market and act on it. But overall, I believe that what's made a very big difference for women that have gotten training through CREA in how not only they manage the managerial, digital, and financial skills is training around soft skills and non-cognitive skills. This is a type of training around socio-emotional skills that allows women to think outside the box. And it's become a lot more relevant in a COVID-19 world where most of the training became remote. And in the future, it will still kind of very likely be hybrid or blended. What we in CREA include in this kind of training helps women think creatively and innovatively. It helps them view the world as a positive world where collaboration and networks can lead to improved results. And an example that I'd like to provide is the story of a woman who used to produce tamales. She's from a town in Mexico where this is a traditional cornmeal staple. It's a type of food that we eat a lot in Mexico. And she faced a lot of competition from women in her town. And when she came to visit our office in Mexico City, she asked what people in our neighborhood were called. And one of our colleagues said, oh, they're hipsters. And so in line with what she had learned during these soft skills training sessions, she researched what these hipsters liked and what they wanted, what they were purchasing. And so she decided that she was not going to compete with the same product, with the same type of traditional tamal, but that she was going to differentiate her offering by making rice flour tamales and vegan tamales. She was going to flavor them with tea and other inputs that women from her network were producing. And this helped her transform her business into a thriving one that grew to employ dozens of women and that is now even exporting tamales. So it's just an example of how the combination of hard skills and these soft skills can really allow women to integrate these and differentiate their businesses and scale.
Thank you so much, Leticia. You brought a very powerful illustration how the combination of hard skill and soft skills is important, and how the soft skills to help women think creatively and take personal initiative. Let me now turn to Dr. Vidyasanti. Dr. Vidyasanti, we are keen to hear your perspective as a policymaker. So in terms of policy, in your experience, why is it important to open up all sectors of the economy to women? And what are the costs for women, for men, for our societies and the economy of gender-based sectoral and occupational segregation? So please tell us, what has been your experience in Indonesia?
Thank you, Hannah. I would like to share my screen for a while. So as you know that based on studies that there is actually mounting evidence around the globe that promoting gender diversity among employees, management and boards can be a business boost, and it could be also a boost to economies. So if you look at this on the right chart, the growing number of studies have demonstrated that there is a positive link between women's participation in the labor market and the GDP growth. I think this is like a very good foundation that actually we need to really push the women to really involve and contribute in economic activities in our country. However, there are still some issues of the gender gap in the world. For example, women in formal employment by industries in selected ASEAN countries is still low, and education levels for Indonesian women, for example, have been increasing, but yet female labor participation stalled in 50% for the past 20 years, even though that the education levels for Indonesian women have been increasing and women participation in education is also increasing. But again, this is an issue that how that actually the educated woman can really participate in the labor market after their graduation is really an issue. Another important one is that disparities are observed within Asia and the Pacific, where some countries have demonstrated wider gender gaps than others. And there is also gender bias in segmentation of jobs for those in formal employment, such as real estate, mining and quarrying, and water supply sector are still underrepresentation for women. So as a result, many women work in the informal sector, and therefore it causes a salary disparity between gender across sectors. So with that, also there's like a note from us that women's participation in STEM also declines when they are entering the workforce. Actually, when they are coming into the college, for example, the pharmacy in the university, in the department of pharmacy, for example, most of the students are women. And most of the students in the biology department in the university are also women. However, women's participation in the STEM workforce is actually still low. For example, only 2 out of 10 professional workers and 3 out of 10 researchers are women. And I think this is because of, one of the reasons is because there is still women gender stereotyping when they are looking for job, and women are less interested in STEM work or employment because of the strong sentiment of male dominated sectors. And also 45% of women says that they are less interested to work in STEM because of strong sentiment of male domination. So I think this is actually the important issue that we have to tackle by really intervene the policies. And I think I'll stop there and thank you.
Dr. Widyasanti, thank you so much for sharing the evidence and policy perspective from Indonesia. And I now would like to turn to our panelists with the second set of questions, including questions from the audience. And in fact, Dr. Widyasanti, I would like to start with you and kind of building on the presentation that you shared to ask you which policies you find most effective to support women entrepreneurs in the near term, and which policies, in your view, are needed for the long term to support the next generation of female entrepreneurs?
So thank you, Hannah, that I would like to divide the policy to support women entrepreneurs. One is in the short term, and the second one is in the long term. So in the short term, the policy really need to facilitate and support the development of women-friendly work environment for the women. And the second one is that support women entrepreneurs or to really connect to business associations and business networks, so it can really build the confidence of women. And the third one is incorporate women-friendly approach, and for example, that we can establish the business development centers that provide consultancy to women who really would like to be a good entrepreneur. And this is also very critical because on the pandemic, during the pandemic, and also post-pandemic, the digitalization will be the key for the women entrepreneurs to really improve their productivity. So I think the improving women skills in digitalization and digital technology will be very important, such as improving or increasing women access to digital technology, and also equip the women to financial inclusion and financial technology. And for the long term, we really need to really equip women by providing training courses, mentoring to develop entrepreneurship skill of the women. And the second one is that to facilitate businesswomen to access markets by working with the government and the private sectors. And the third one is to promote work-life balance of the women who really, become the entrepreneurs. And promoting work-life balance is very important. So women with dual responsibilities can make a balance between working and the family, and also provide a greater access of women to social protection. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vidyasanti, for these illustrations of effective policies, including improving market access for women, building entrepreneurship skills, enhancing digital inclusion and financial inclusion. Also, all these important areas where policies have been very much following and building on the evidence that is available. Now, thinking of financial inclusion, I would like now to turn to Leticia, thinking about how evidence shows that male-dominated sectors usually have higher capital requirements. So in your experience, Leticia, what works to address the capital needs of female entrepreneurs, and what could the entrepreneur, the private sector, development partners, and other stakeholders do to improve the access to finance for women entrepreneurs?
The COVID-19 pandemic, I think, made it even more evident that the economic autonomy of women is at risk due to a large percentage of them being unemployed, underemployed, or employed in informal markets because of the digital gender gap and due to low access to financial services. I think no matter what kind of female entrepreneur we're looking at, be it those launching tech startups, impact entrepreneurs, or female entrepreneurs with micro and small businesses, they're all facing funding challenges and limitations in access to finance. And for example, in the case of Mexico, less than 11% of micro and small enterprises led by women receive loans from financial institutions. And when they do receive them, those tend to be a lot smaller than loans for male counterparts. Marcus already talked about the lack of access to collateral for most women. And that's one reason or example of why they have limitations in accessing this type of financial support. But there's other sociocultural aspects that prevent women from accessing financial products, be it because they don't feel comfortable going into those institutions, they have a history of not being able to access them or being turned away. There's a lot of challenges in how the businesses are structured and whether they have the right kind of documentation and that sort of thing. But it's very exciting to hear the type of policies that are going to be supported in the short term. In the case of Indonesia, for example, as was mentioned by Madam Deputy Minister, I believe that first and foremost, the private and public sectors could and should be collaborating by creating incentives for individuals and organizations to invest in women-owned enterprises. In the case of micro and small enterprises, that means creating incentives for tailored financial services, for social capital, for impact investing. It also means modernizing existing government guarantee, grant, and loan programs that can support women entrepreneurs to compete in a changing environment that's also seeing new types of investment models arise. And it means creating new sources of capital by incentivizing crowdfunding, investing models, for example, and other types of investment that are fiscally accessible for a lot more people. But as it also has been highlighted, it's not just about creating or boosting the offerings on the financial side. It's also about strengthening the women's positions by supporting them in accessing value chains and providing incentives for minority or diverse suppliers, regardless of their size, for example. It means supporting training in the digital economy for female entrepreneurs, similar to what Regina is doing at Sorongo Academy. And in order for that to happen, it means we need to provide access to connectivity kind of nationally in all of these countries. It means providing financial and fiscal support for women to access business support services, continuing education and training programs, as well as networks. And in order to do that, it means we need to change the care systems to provide them with access to longer school days, to childcare services, to many other services, because otherwise one thing in isolation is not gonna improve the ability for the women to access that financial support, or they may be able to access the financial support, but they won't be able to deliver the same kind of results that they could deliver if they had access to the rest of the infrastructure and systems in place in order for them to be able to grow successfully and compete not only in male-dominated sectors, but kind of across the economy in any way they decide to do so, as entrepreneurs, as employees, or even as students, et cetera. So really, I think promoting access to financial instruments, markets, resiliency is a combination and an ecosystem of factors that will allow these women to grow.
Thank you so much, Leticia, and I very much appreciate your emphasis on the partnership and alignment between the public sector and the private sector to support incentives to address the needs of women, and the fact that the alignment needs to cut across a number of areas, from financing to digital to care services and so on, to address the complex challenges that women entrepreneurs face. Now, I would like now to turn to Regina. In fact, building on what Leticia was just discussing, we have received a question from the audience about your experience as a CEO setting up your own business. What kind of barriers you found or you experienced in getting financial support to grow your business, and the kind of barriers that you think that men would not face?
That's a very interesting question. And I just want to say what Leticia and the Deputy Minister said are all very spot on. And I'm glad that we could have all those insights in the conversation. So when I was starting my business, I would say one of my early on barriers was not having, enough access to the right information, not having access to mentors to guide me through the process. Also, simply not knowing how to present well and understanding the financials between setting up a sustainable business. So I would say early on in the beginning, and it wasn't something that was in my socialization. So I came into the space with an idea, but not enough of, the technical know-how in terms of how you set up a business. So that was the first thing. I had to take some time to understand what are the legal, the regulatory frameworks that are required. And there wasn't a lot of information at one place. So in my country, for example, you had to go to different regulatory bodies. So the getting started was an uphill battle, because first you even needed to figure out where do you have to go. When it came to time for funding and presenting my business, I had to make a very strong case. When I initially decided to, present a model such as teaching women and girls coding, there was an initial sort of backlash, as in it wouldn't work, they wouldn't get it, it was too early in its time. But I had to really sort of pilot. So I used my own capital to sort of do a proof of concept. And I would advise that, it's good when, funders see some self-investment into the idea to see that you've put in some work. So I didn't go in just with the idea, I did some research. I did some market research also, because I wanted to go in with some insights. I didn't want to come into the space not really understanding what was happening on the ground. And so I also did some market research. And then I presented a picture of where we were and where we could be going, And I think also the other challenge for me was getting over the self-doubt. And I say this because we hear this from a lot of female entrepreneurs. It's like they suffer this imposter syndrome, or they're afraid that they're not able to meet whatever expectation is out there. So for me, I had to mute the voice that kept telling me, you know, I'm not able, I'm not going to do well, I'm going to fail. And also mute the voice of others that kept telling me, why don't you go into safer spaces? You know, that's what they would say. Oh, why don't you try something that you are more suited for? Whatever that may mean. And for me, technology is something that I love, that I'm passionate about. So those were all the different challenges. And another challenge, which I have to add on, is as soon as I started getting more successful in my space and I was climbing on into areas where the funding, the number of zeros was getting up, I had to prove myself more, even though I had a track record. So I was still coming in against opposition, even though I had demonstrated that I could do it, but there was still a little bit of, can you show us a little bit of what you can do, even though I've been doing it a lot. And also, like I always say, you need mentors and you need allies. You know, sometimes it's good to go into the space with maybe other men or other successful women who have built a network, understand all those inner workings, you know, to get you off those hurdles. So I would definitely recommend mentors. I would definitely recommend allies. And I would definitely recommend muting self-doubts.
Thank you, Regina. Again, you highlighted how the traditional norms are contributing to the many challenges that women face. And I would like actually to build on your response and ask you another question. And that is, you know, how can role models and mentors help break traditional norms and serve as gate openers for women entrepreneurs to transition to male-dominated sectors? And specifically, what lessons do you have from your social initiative at the Soronoko Academy? And maybe a follow-up question also, how can we engage men to help make male-dominated sectors more inclusive?
Thank you very much. I would start by even saying this conversation I'm having right now with Letitia and the doctor is very inspiring. So I'm leaving with two role models that I'm looking at. And it's great to see, you know, such inspiring women and to hear from them. So role models really show you that it's possible, especially in communities where you see women are limited by their gender. And this is what we come up against with the women that we engage with. They come from communities where their mothers, their grandmothers did the same thing, and it was very limiting. So to them, you know, their aspirations is defined by their community. And so it's important that they see women that are breaking the mold, that have shattered the glass ceiling, that are hopefully destroying the glass walls to show that it's possible. And it's also great, you know, that the young girls can see and have people to aspire to. For me, you know, I didn't have a lot of female mentors when I was coming up, but now I have a whole tribe, a whole army, and I think that is important. To answer your other question about learnings from our training women and girls, especially in digital, is you first have to sort of work on that mindset that they are not good enough to come into the spaces. And when the women unlock that potential, what they are able to do is really mind-blowing. So we've had a woman come from doing nothing to now building a mobile app company and making a lot of money. Or we've had a young girl who felt that she wasn't going to be good in technology, you know, building a really great app and then being a really great role model to others. So it's really seeing that digital is not something that is gender specific. And to the other question that you asked about how do we get men involved, I think we need to have more conversations with the men in the room. I see that each time we start to talk about gender, it's like it's filled with women, we're speaking to the converted. We run a program targeted at teaching our trainers across the country how to be gender intentional. And mostly the trainers are men, unfortunately. And when you go across and you're looking for a lot of trainers. And one thing we realized from having these conversations with the men is sometimes, you know, they are unaware of the situations and the challenges, even though we think that we've been, you know, talking a lot to them. Sometimes because they are excluded from the conversations, they are really unaware of the issues. And in other times, you know, they come up against a lot of the women will come up with a lot of anger with how they've been left behind. And for the men, they feel like they need to protect their territory. They are scared of the world where women are empowered, where they lose their position. And we have to help them to understand that that is not what is going to happen. It's better if we work together. innovation thrives with diversity, two perspectives. So it's important that we start talking to the men. It's important that we get the men involved, where we've seen women thrive in businesses, like it says in the report, spousal support, having a male, their fathers or uncles or brothers help them. So it's important that we really task the men to help us, because when women win, we all win, so that would be my feedback.
Thank you so much, Regina. And indeed, you highlighted the importance to involve men in the solutions. And in this direction of thinking and discussion, I now would like to turn to Leticia with a question we just received from the audience, whether we are proposing a model that leads to a greater gender balance in sectors. And that means not only more women in male-dominated sectors, but also more men in female-dominated sectors. So should we promote men transition to female-dominated sectors, and how? Leticia.
This is a great question, and I think it's very much related to what Regina was mentioning. There has to be kind of that exchange. And when we think about feminism, it means talking about men and women. It doesn't just go one way, and we need both men and women to be involved. And there are similar barriers and challenges for men trying to break into traditionally female sectors. They are very stigmatized. There's a lot of pushback. We also see that kind of pushback when men are taking paternal leaves, now that a lot of companies are including that as part of the support to men and women being co-responsible in how they care for children, for example. And what we see is there's a lot of pressure for men not to take it. And when they do, they are sometimes ostracized or pushed aside because it's considered that it wasn't, quote unquote, manly, or it was just there as a policy, but not to be used. There's incredible cases of male nurses, and that's one of the professions, for example, where traditionally, if we think of a doctor, we think of a man. If we think of a nurse, we think of a woman. And there are a lot of programs that need to allow for anyone to participate in the type of profession or entrepreneurial sector that they want. I wanted to add another kind of perspective to what Regina was saying, because I truly believe that mentorship has allowed me to get to where I am, but there is a role for men to play in the case of sponsorship. So given that so many more men are in leadership positions and that women are having to break through those glass ceilings, there is an opportunity for men to not just mentor women, but actually sponsor them so that they can get access to different kinds of funding, so that they can get access to new networks. So I think sometimes we forget about this additional component that goes beyond providing advice and guidance, and actually means that you're going to put skin in the game and you're really going to put your reputation behind a woman. The same could happen for these men that are trying to break into what are considered female-led sectors, and for women to sponsor those men and to create and craft those opportunities. So I just wanted to say that, because I think it's made a big difference in how women can break through in some sectors where otherwise it would have been very complicated. And some men have been those types of sponsors and have created that type of opportunity.
Thank you so much, Leticia. And you also very nicely illustrated that there is truly a win-win for women and men when there is a better gender balance in sectors and in professions. I now would like to, again, coming back to policies and the government, what the government can do and has been doing, and I would like to turn again to Dr. Vidyasanti. Dr. Vidyasanti, considering women entrepreneurs who already crossed over to male-dominated sectors and the kind of unique challenges that they face in seeking success. So what policies and programs, in your experience, help female entrepreneurs to succeed in male-dominated sectors once they are there, once they successfully move into these sectors?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to say that when we are trying to convince the women itself that they are actually be able to cross to the male-dominated sectors, then it is a good start for women to make them confidence to work in the male-dominated sectors. But the second one is that also we have to educate not only the woman itself, but also the man itself, where we have to open up the eyes of men in the man-dominated sectors, that actually they have to welcome women, their women colleagues and women who would like to work in the male-dominated sectors. So I think this is very important, because once the male colleagues are really open their mind, and also they are really welcome the women to work with them in the male-dominated sectors, then I think this is, really can upgrade the women to really put their, achievement, and they can really optimize their skills and their achievement in to achieve the success of the women in that male-dominated sectors. So I think this is a very important issue, because it is actually to really break down the stereotyping of women in that sectors, and disseminate, and also the policies to open up male perception is really very important. And the third one is that we need also really to provide infrastructure for women to be able to work in male-dominated sectors, such as, for example, the place for childcare facility, for example, and also the other one is such as for breastfeeding facility. So when women with young children can still really come to the workplace.
Dr. Vidyasanti, it looks like the connection has dropped, but thank you for the important points that you made, and the illustrations about the policies and public investments that help women once they cross over in the male-dominated sectors and overall in entrepreneurships. But you also illustrated that it is not only about top-down policies and programs, that it is also about changing the mindsets of men as well as women. And in that context, I would like to ask you, and also ask Regina and Leticia, about your perspective on partnerships. What kind of partnerships you find effective in your work, but as policymaker or as entrepreneur? And specifically, if you have any reflections also on how international development partners can support the efforts to empower female entrepreneurs and their success in male-dominated sector. So, Dr. Vidyasanti, back to you with this question. Dr. Vidyasanti, we cannot hear you.
Yeah. Partnership in the workplace is very important because, I feel that also I work in quite male-dominated education program, and also most of the level that I'm now is also male-dominated position. So I think one of the important ones that we really need to show to our male colleagues that women, when working, is also can work professionally. So I think this is one of the one way that we can really make our male colleagues confidence for women to work together with them. So I think this is also one of very important from the women itself, that we can work together, partnering with our male colleagues, so they can really confident to work with us because they know that we can work professionally with them.
Regina, same question to you. So how do you see effective partnerships to address the challenges facing women in entering male-dominated sectors and succeeding in these sectors?
So one of the things that I've seen that have worked in terms of partnerships is setting quota systems. So for example, in my country, within the startup ecosystem for tech startups, there was a point where funders were looking for businesses that had at least one female co-founder or had at least a certain percentage of females that worked in the business. And that was an incentive for a lot of tech startups, to be intentional about getting women on board into their teams. So we saw more women, as either the co-founder or working in a technical role. So that is one. And the other one is, being intentional about getting corporates, to really look at, how are they doing when it comes to the gender dynamics in their organizations? How are they doing when it comes to gender in the board positions? How are they doing when it comes to gender, in the decision-making process? So we really have to get even corporate organizations, public institutions to really look at how can they be intentional about getting more women. And then we'll see like these types of partnerships will definitely work. But I think there definitely needs to be more of a push to get more women into these male-dominated spaces.
Very good point on the need to have push as well as pull to have more women in male-dominated sectors and succeed in these sectors. So let me now turn with the same question to Leticia. Leticia, from your perspective, what kind of partnerships you find effective in supporting female entrepreneurs in male-dominated sectors?
Thank you, Hannah. And I love this kind of push and pull, because I think when we think about diversity, we also need to think about inclusion, no? And that's that push and pull and making sure that it's not just diverse, but they're also having a voice and participation. And in the case of CREA, I think everything we've been able to do has been through partnerships. And it's essential to partner with government and public institutions, because they are the ones that have the ability to provide access to all populations. And they have the ability to really influence and change legislations and policies. And what we can provide in a lot of cases is data about how to focalize that type of support, where it can be most effective, and have evidence of how that investment can turn into economic development. We've had incredible partnerships with international organizations such as the World Bank around impact evaluation and being able to very rigorously measure the type of impact that we want to have. And that in turn gives us evidence and data that we can use with private sector partners to gather the type of support, be it funding, resources, or access to new networks that can allow us to grow. And then finally, I think the word that Regina used is perfect. It's like, how do we build a tribe of support around the women that we work with, around our own kind of needs as entrepreneurs, to be able to scale effectively and to be able to then pay it forward to others that need us in their network and that need this kind of support.
Thank you so much, Leticia. So we now have the final 5 minutes for this panel before we turn to Ms. Mamta Murthy, Vice President for Human Development, for concluding remarks. So I just would like to ask you a final question to each of you for a brief reflection, and that is, when you look into the future, you look for the next 10 years, what should be our aspiration as global community when it comes to female entrepreneurs, or more broadly, women's economic empowerment? And what solution or what approach you think would be most effective or most critical to take on the way forward to make a difference in the next 10 years? So let me perhaps start with Regina.
So for me, I think we definitely need more digital skills. So women need to be equipped with the digital skills to be able to take advantage in whatever industry that they find themselves. Digital is always an enabler and it sets you apart. I am inspired by the work of initiatives such as the Women Entrepreneurs in Finance initiative that's housed by the World Bank, that is intentional about getting funding, to more women entrepreneurs. So we need to see also more funding. I think women are over-mentored a little bit when it comes to entrepreneurship and not funded as much. So we need to really close the funding gap. The last piece is we really need to showcase positive stories. I think there are lots of amazing women doing amazing work, and it's time that we highlight those women such that we normalize breaking glass ceilings and women don't feel like they're alone on that path.
Thank you, Regina. And I'm delighted. And in fact, in this discussion, we have an opportunity to highlight such wonderful success stories embedded in yourself, in our speakers. Let me now turn to Leticia. Same question, the aspiration and how to get there.
Thank you, Hannah. I think that's an ambitious question. And something that you mentioned or alluded to earlier is kind of having the possibility of not treating women as a monolith. No, so I think one of the pending things is to really highlight the diversity of roles and leadership positions and success stories that exist across women. And this is a report that highlights something that is a lot of times invisibilized, women that are in male-dominated sectors, not just women that are doing incredible things where we expect them to be those incredible success stories. No, so one, I would say, like, really highlighting the diversity of success stories that we have for women and sharing these role models across the board so that any child, whether they be a boy, girl, or anything they want to be, can get inspired and decide where they want to grow into in the future. And the second piece, in addition to everything that Regina said, I think is getting women into the decision-making positions so that the funding is available, so that digital skills and technological opportunities are open, so that companies have a balanced culture and a positive culture for women from the board to leadership positions, and same in government, so that we have female representatives such as Madam Deputy Minister that can inspire us to believe that we can and will be developing in any sector that we want.
Thank you so much, Leticia, and thank you for highlighting the power of success stories and the value added of women's leadership, of women's participation in decision-making. Dr. Vidyasanti, what is your take? What is the aspiration and how to get there?
So actually we need to improve, and life learning is very important for the women. So don't stop learning. Because by life learning is meaning that we can always keep up with the opportunity, and we can keep up with the new technology and new opportunity. So women have to really life learning throughout their life. And the second one is that women have to improve their skills in building networking, because by building the networking, we can help each other to promote to be a higher position for one another. So women can be stronger to build their community and build stronger together in improving the position of women to the important decision-making process. And I think this is very important for women to be greater in the future.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Vidyasanti. And I think your final remarks illustrate that indeed action is needed on all fronts, from policies, programs, private sector, community, including men, but also women, to continue learning and build their network and have the audacity to succeed. So with that, let me thank our distinguished panelists. Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Leticia. Thank you, Dr. Vidyasanti. It has been a fascinating discussion, and we very much look forward to continuing the discussion and continuing the collaboration and continuing showcasing and drawing lessons from the success stories that also each of you have shared. I now would like to turn to Ms. Mamta Murthy, Vice President for Human Development at the World Bank, and invite Mamta to share her closing remarks. Mamta, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and thank you to our distinguished panelists and to Marcus, Naira, and the whole team that wrote the report. I'd like to present myself as a little bit of a crossover, somebody who has moved into a male-dominated sector. I'm an economist, and I quickly did a Google search, and one of the sites that I hit upon said that 74% of economists in the world are men. So I've moved into a male-dominated sector. And what each of you said really resonated with me. Regina, I think it was you who said that we all need to inspire each other. And Letitia, you said we need to be a tribe of successful women. And Dr. Vidyasanti, you said we're stronger together. So to me, to conclude, based on the remarks that have been made at this panel and reflecting on the study, I think I'm drawing inspiration from what each of you has said. So first, just let me comment on some of the things that I heard, which I found very inspiring, and I think we should reflect on as we go about our work. Makhtar began by saying, making us go through this thought exercise of what constitutes a man's work and what constitutes a woman's work, and he made the forceful case that we have preconceptions, and this is often the root cause of this profitarchy, as he called it, or gendered hierarchy of profits across sectors. And I think this is something we should reflect on to begin changing in our own life and in the work that we do, some of the norms that we operate under, mental norms that we operate under. Marcus then made an excellent presentation of the Breaking Barriers report. And this, of course, was complemented by the insights from all our panelists. In Regina's remark, Regina is the CEO of the Soronco Academy. She described the 5-second shock reaction when she walks into a room and where a male-dominated room, which typically drops a 0 when they see her. Letitia, you talked about the importance of social-emotional skills. That's very important. So these are not skills that tend to be emphasized, but they're very important for growing businesses. Dr. Vidyasanti, you highlighted the need for women not only to obtain STEM degrees and STEM skills, but also to pursue STEM fields. All of these were very striking to me, and because they reaffirm, in my mind, some of the work that we're doing in human development to support women and women entrepreneurs to move into male-dominated sectors. Reports like the one that we launched today are a part of the analytical toolbox that we have. And we use this analysis to support programs and have policy dialogue with countries so that we can make an attempt to move the needle or make a nudge that moves the needle and helps women acquire the skills and enter sectors where they can be more productive, helping themselves, their families, and of course, the economy. I also want to say that in the work of the World Bank, we try and start early. So we are pursuing some of these ideas, not just at the post-secondary stage. We try and pursue them at the secondary school level. Our very successful SWED program focuses on providing skills and changing the mindset of adolescent girls so that this process can begin early in life. I want to touch upon some of the recurring themes in the discussion, all of which resonated with me. We talked about training, mentorship, and building entrepreneurship skills amongst women, supporting women to access markets and connect to other women entrepreneurs through business associations and networks, linking women to role models and information. Marcus gave a very excellent example from the study on the role of information in supporting career choice. We talked about the importance of access to finance. So the need for loans, grants, and other ways of reaching women who do not have access to financial resources for entrepreneurship. The collaboration between the public and the private sector, the role of care infrastructure, the role of social norms, all of these were highlighted. And I think they are helping to enrich the way we as the World Bank think about the work that we do in supporting a change in female participation and female entrepreneurship in male-dominated sectors. Now, I want to have two further reflections. Although today's discussion focused on female entrepreneurship, and because the Breaking Barriers book is about female entrepreneurship, obviously the issue of occupational segregation is broader than entrepreneurship. And in fact, in the panel discussion, I noticed that both issues were discussed, entrepreneurship as well as female participation in male-dominated sectors. And I very much want to underline the point that was made about the unfulfilled potential of people and of economies by locking people out of certain sectors. And as we think about the underlying causes of occupational segregation, it's very important to recognize that this starts early in life and accumulates over time. And that is why early interventions are very important. And here I would like to say that as the World Bank, we focus a fair bit on these early interventions. We focus on secondary school, tertiary education. We focus on skills and entrepreneurship training. We think very carefully and have policy dialogue around the barriers that women have to accessing finance. Each of these are early interventions in their own way. And we also focus on the care infrastructure, which is extremely important in supporting female labor force participation. I want to say that some of the research that has been undertaken in the Breaking Barriers book, we are very happy is going to help us expand programs that are having results. Marcus spoke about the program in the Republic of Congo, where we have learned that women are more likely to apply for vocational training in male-dominated sectors when they receive information about the prospects in these sectors. And so I'm very happy to say that based on these findings, we are proposing to go forward with additional resources and additional financing, which will aim to reach 7,500 additional women with this information on sector-specific earnings to nudge further the decision to go into a male-dominated sector. Of course, we are aware that a result that you see in a small scale may not necessarily translate as you try to scale up. So this is something that we will continue to research and observe to make sure that we learn from the experience of taking something from small scale to a larger scale, so that we can improve upon it and provide advice, not just in the Republic of Congo, but elsewhere. Finally, I'm going to conclude with two remarks. This is a year when we are coming to the end of gender strategy, and we're in the process of developing a new gender action plan. And events such as this one and the launch of the report like Breaking Barriers is an opportunity for us to reflect on what have we learned as an institution on what works in promoting gender equality. Because we're in this process of thinking about what are the areas that the World Bank should focus on next, I really welcome your participation and all those who are participating via the chat function, I really welcome this because it's pushing us to think, to refine our thoughts further, and to develop more and better programs and provide better policy advice on to governments on how to improve female participation in male-dominated sectors and how to accelerate equality. So that's just to place this event in the context of this year-long effort that we have to think about our action plan for the coming years. The last point I want to make is that, and I don't want to lose the specific focus of today's report launch, we really are committed to ensuring that women entrepreneurs can emerge in male-dominated sectors. And in our view, this goes beyond breaking the walls to the side, the glass walls, as Marcus described it. It also requires breaking of the glass ceiling. And we are very aware that issues of harassment and discrimination in male-dominated workspaces are a factor that holds women back. So that's another area that on which we intend to continue to focus and continue to engage so that we can understand better the role that institutions like ourselves can play in helping reduce harassment and discrimination. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your engagement. It's been a terrific hour and a half. I hope you all believe that it's been very well spent. And please do continue to engage with us, continue to send us your suggestions as we work both on our strategy and action plan for the coming years, but also as we work on supporting more female entrepreneurs in male-dominated sectors. With that, thank you. I'm going to hand it back to you, Hannah.
Thank you very much, Mamta. Thank you for your concluding remark, highlighting how important the discussion today has been and will be for the future, including informing what the World Bank is doing, how the World Bank is engaging, and what will come into the new action plan, and also the importance of the report of evidence to inform policy change and further change on the way forward. I also would like to thank again Marcus, Naira, and the team that developed the report and presented the evidence to inform and inspire further change and interventions. I would like also thank to Maktar for the opening remarks, our distinguished panelists, Regina, Leticia, and Dr. Vidyasanti. Thank you again for sharing your perspectives, your insights, and your own success stories as role models. And finally, I would like to thank our audience for your active participation. And we are very much looking forward to continuing the discussion and collaboration on the way forward. Thank you, and all the best to all of us.